When a season looks completely over and dead in the water, as in the team in question has no chance whatsoever of making it to the playoffs, that team has two options to approach the rest of the campaign. Option one, play the best players possible that give you the best chance at winning games. Option two, play the youngsters, see what you have in terms of future talent, and see who can help the team out for next season. In other words, imagine if the Cleveland Browns were terrible in 2025 and we're in December, and the team has been mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. Joe Flacco is the best quarterback that you've got on your roster, and he gives you the best chance to win. But you want to see what Dillon Gabriel can do and see if the rookie can be the future quarterback going forward, and if you can reliably and comfortably build around him for 2026. Each team takes a vastly different approach with this strategy, depending on how the starter looks, how the youngster looks, how each player factors into future plans, and a whole bunch of other factors. This is not a one-size-fits-all model by any means. However, if you're going to do this, I can tell you the approach that you should not, under any circumstances, use. I can tell you the dumbest way to go about this strategy, which is to try and play the best of both worlds, Hannah Montana style, and fail miserably, confusing everyone in the process in the span of one game and making everyone scratch their heads about how utterly incompetent you are. Because this team that you've been watching this entire time is the 1964 New York Giants. And yes, we're going back more than 60 years for this one. The Giants were an absolute mess that season, as we'll talk about in a little bit, and as you can probably tell from all these lowlights. And if you want to know just how bad they were, and just how awful Allie Sherman was as a head coach, look at what happened at the end of this season, when Sherman decided to look into the future, only to immediately reverse course when the future was looking a little too good. Because what followed was one of the most bizarre benchings in NFL history, one of the dumbest quarterback carousels of all time, and a decision that may have been forgotten about all these years later, but deserves a deep dive today. Because this is the story behind what might just be, considering the circumstances, the dumbest quarterback controversy in the long history of the New York Giants franchise. Make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel. Because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you might not know about. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing as we try and grow this community even more. And with that in mind, let's talk about the Giants committing a giant mistake. Before I talk about the incident in question, we need some context to understand just how bad the 1964 Giants were to get to the point of hopelessness in the first place. In 1961, the New York Giants lost the NFL championship. In 1962, the New York Giants lost the NFL championship. In 1963, the New York Giants lost the NFL championship. In 1964, however, the New York Giants did not lose the NFL championship. The reason why is because they lost many, many games before that. And I truly mean many games. If you ask someone what the biggest fall-off is from one season where they made it to the championship to the next season, this is up there with what happened to the Oakland Raiders after Super Bowl 37 as one of the biggest ever. Because the Giants went from almost champions 3 years in a row to the cellar of the NFL overnight. When you've got an aging core and keep them around, and you make poor roster move after poor roster move, and you combine that with a coach in Allie Sherman who was ridiculously in over his head, this is what you're going to get. A crash and a fall-off unlike any other. We were 11 weeks into the 1964 season, and as you could probably tell, the New York Giants were not very good. The Giants were literally dead last in the NFL, sitting ugly with a 2-7-2 record. Even if they won every game the rest of the way, by some stroke of luck, there was no way that they could make it to the playoffs. considering this was at a time when only the winner of the conference made it, and the Cleveland Browns led the conference thus far with 8 wins. After the Giants lost their previous game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, the second worst team in the conference, by a final score of 44-17, the Giants were all alone in the cellar. There were many reasons why the Giants absolutely stunk in 1964. They had no ground game to speak of. Of the 14 teams in the league, the Giants were at the bottom in yards per carry, with guys like Ernie Wheelwright, Alex Webster, and Steve Thurlow doing next to nothing. You know, it's always a good sign when your leading rusher on the season finishes the year with 0 rushing touchdowns. The Giants had a porous secondary that allowed more touchdowns than any team in football, and a porous defense that allowed more points than any team in football. The Giants were extremely sloppy and careless with the ball, committing more turnovers than any team in football, turning it over every single game, and having more games with 6 turnovers than games with less than 2 turnovers. And the Giants went from the #1 offense in 1963 to, with 3 games left in the season, the worst offense in 1964, scoring just 179 points or 16 points per game. For perspective, they scored 32 points per game in 1963. That number was literally down in half by Thanksgiving of 1964. And the biggest culprit of it all? This man right here, quarterback Y.A. Tittle. It's very obvious that Y.A. Tittle is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason, and in 1963, he had maybe his finest season as a pro, and he showed exactly why that was the case when he threw for 36 touchdowns, led the league in touchdowns and completion percentage, and was named the MVP of the league, as well as a Pro Bowler and an AP First Team All-Pro. He had made it to each of the last 3 Pro Bowls, had led the league in touchdown passes each of the past 2 seasons, and had played an instrumental part in guiding the Giants to those championship games in the early 1960s. Want to know why no Giant has worn the number 14 jersey since Tittle, despite the fact that Tittle only played 4 seasons with the team? Because he was that good. But at the end of the day, Father Time is undefeated, and it comes for us all. And man, did Father Time come for Tittle. Because 1 year after being the best quarterback in football, he was one of the worst. The 38-year-old was a shell of himself. Remember how Peyton Manning went from a god in 2013 to being practically worthless once the second half of 2014 rolled around? That's what happened with Tittle. The fall-off was steep and sudden. Very few quarterbacks can go out on top from a production standpoint. And to say that Y.A. Tittle did not go out on top would be the understatement of the century. In 1963, Tittle threw 36 touchdown passes. In 1964, he threw 10. In 1963, Tittle threw 14 interceptions, meaning that he had a touchdown-to-interception ratio of somewhere in the ballpark of 5-2. In 1964, Tittle threw 22 interceptions, which meant that his touchdown-to-interception ratio was worse than 1-2, which was obviously not good. It's definitely not anywhere close to 5-2. In 1963, he led the NFL with a passer rating of 104.8. This was the 4th highest passer rating in NFL history at the time. In 1964, that passer rating was 51.6, being cut by more than 50%. Of the 17 quarterbacks to throw at least 100 passes in 1964, Tittle's rating was dead last. From the king of the hill to the bottom of the hill. You get the idea. Y.A. Tittle absolutely stunk in 1964. And it was clear that the 1964 season would be his last. He was going to retire, and it was time for the Giants to look toward the future. And so, in preparation for a Week 12 matchup against Washington, the Giants decided to do what no one thought was possible 1 year ago, seeing how well both he and the team were playing at that time. They were going to prepare for life without Y.A. Tittle. Because while Tittle would ride the bench, the man starting for New York in this game would be this man right here, Gary Wood. Wood was drafted by the Giants out of Cornell in the 8th round of the 1964 NFL Draft, choosing the Giants of the NFL over the Boston Patriots of the rival AFL. And after playing sparingly to start the year off, though he did score the game-winning rushing touchdown against Washington in the first meeting of the season back in Week 3, oddly enough, he was going to get the start here. Coach Sherman wanted to see what Wood had to offer, and whether the Giants could build around him in 1965, or whether they needed to look in a different direction. This game was Gary Wood's game. On the road against Bill McPeak's squad, against their rival, Wood was going to have his chance to shine. And through the first 3 quarters of the contest, he absolutely did. He rose to the occasion. As you can tell from these highlights, Gary Wood was playing extremely well. He did not look like a rookie in the slightest bit, as the Giants, who had the worst offense in football entering this game and were averaging just 16 points a contest, already had 21 through 3 quarters. By the time the 4th quarter started, the Giants trailed by just 2 points, trailing 23-21. Considering the fact that Washington entered this game as double-digit favorites, that's not bad at all. Wood had multiple explosive plays of over 20 yards passing, and not only had a passing touchdown to his name, connecting with Aaron Thomas in the 3rd quarter to briefly give the Giants the lead, but he had a rushing touchdown in the 2nd quarter too. The Giants had scored just 27 points in their last 2 games with Tittle under center, and didn't cross the 20-point mark in either of them. But this felt like a different Giant team. If this was the direction that the Giants were going to going forward, then they were in really good hands. 3 quarters in, and Gary Wood was showing no signs of slowing down. 1 more quarter to go, and if the Giants can keep up this offensive pace of theirs, then they'll win their 3rd game of the season, pull off a monumental upset, and have a really bright spot in an otherwise dark season. So after throwing 18 passes in the first 3 quarters, guess how many passes Gary Wood threw in the 4th quarter? Go on, take a guess. Do you want to know the right answer? I'll let Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street let you know.
Well, it's 0. That means it's nothing.
That's right, 0. Zilch, nada, none, zippo. For whatever insane reason, during this game right here, Washington scored 13 points in the 4th quarter to win it 36-21, taking it by 3 possessions, as the Giants didn't score in the 4th, because the man quarterbacking the Giants during that final period of play was none other than Y.A. Tittle. And it wasn't for performance reasons, or disciplinary reasons, or injury reasons, or anything along those lines. Nope. Head coach Allie Sherman, being the brain-dead head coach that he was, decided that it was time to bench Wood. The decision to put the rotting corpse of Y.A. Tittle out there did not work out in the slightest bit, as Tittle came off the bench and finished the game completing just 50% of his passes while throwing for no touchdowns and 2 interceptions, and posting a passer rating of 26, which is worse than if he did nothing but spike the ball into the ground on every single play. And for the record, that was way worse than Gary Wood's passer rating. The whole point of this game was to see what you had for the future and to give the offense a spark after how bad Tittle had played and looked as of late. And when the future looks good and you've got your spark, you decide to bench the player doing well and go back to Tittle? Naturally, there was an explanation after this game right here for why the Giants did what they did, because no one could understand it at first. As one writer said, Allie Sherman had a brainstorm, or what he thought was a brainstorm, when Sherman sent in Y.A. Tittle. This was not the finest hour for either Tittle or Sherman. Watching, you wish that the old man had quit after he ruined his knee in the championship game against the Bears a year ago. Then, he would have left the game as a respected and loved hero. Yesterday, he was just another tired old man whose number was up. He couldn't cut it anymore, and the tough, young men in the Washington uniforms were impatient to take advantage of him. They pushed and bullied and kicked him out of the way, and gave him the kind of beating in one quarter that should convince him that there has to be an easier dodge for antiques, even if the money isn't as good. But there was a very good reason why Sherman put Tittle in the game and reignited this quarterback controversy for some reason, to the detriment of his team. The reason why? Because Gary Wood might have sucked in the fourth quarter, and Sherman didn't want to take that chance. Said Sherman, in what is somehow a real quote from a coach that made it to 3 straight championship games, "I took Wood out because I felt he had reached the point where he might pressure himself. We had a man on the bench who might be able to take advantage of the situation. I definitely didn't bench Wood because he was playing poorly." Seriously. That is legitimate logic by Sherman. Wood wasn't playing poorly, but there was a chance that in a close game in the fourth quarter, he was going to play poorly. Even though, there was no evidence to suggest that, and the guy on the bench that you put in was the literal worst quarterback in football that season. Wasn't the point of this game to see what Wood could do? Wasn't the point of this game right here that you've been watching this whole time to see what you had in your rookie signal caller? Here was a chance to see it and see if Wood could rise to the occasion. And you benched him just because he might have failed. Imagine if you're taking a driving test, you're crushing it so far, and on the final part, the 3-point turn, the driving instructor says, "Good job, but we've got to end the test here. You're not going to pass and get your license because you didn't do the 3-point turn. But I'm not going to let you attempt the 3-point turn because I'm not sure you can do it, even though you haven't done anything wrong so far." Like, what's the logic there? If you're going to go with Tittle, then go with Tittle. If you're going to go with the young guy and turn over a new leaf, then do that. But don't do both, especially when the young guy is playing well. This is like the Jalen Hurts Nate Sudfeld thing that Doug Peterson did in 2020 on Sunday Night Football, except on steroids. I've seen coaches bench quarterbacks for many reasons before. Not running the offense the way it was supposed to be run, turning the ball over, the game getting out of hand, disciplinary reasons, wanting to see some new blood, not wanting to take any chances with an injury. But I have never seen that coach bench a quarterback off of pure speculation. Speculation isn't evidence. Yet this 3-time championship appearing coach decided to use it as such, and it backfired miserably on him during this game. After this game right here, it was all downhill for Wood. He didn't start any games in 1965. He started 6 games in 1966, where he went 0-6 and threw just 6 touchdowns on 13 interceptions on a team that was somehow worse than the 1964 team, and he threw 5 interceptions and 24 passing attempts with the Giants in 1968. The former 8th-round pick was not the answer for the Giants under center long-term, and did not play well at any point after that 1964 season. But when it came to this game, which the Giants lost for a variety of reasons, from poor pass defense to Tittle's atrocious playing in the fourth quarter that never should have happened in the first place, Allie Sherman committed just about every sin that a coach can commit. Manufacture a quarterback controversy? Check. Take out the hot hand? Check. Base your decision off of literally nothing of substance? Check. Bench a player while saying that the player played well? Check. Literally nothing, absolutely nothing about this decision made sense. And more than 6 decades later, it has to be one of the most baffling decisions in New York Giants history. Because in 1964, while Y.A. Tittle was blowing this game right here, Gary Wood would rot on the bench. A giant mistake by a giant failure of a head coach. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name at the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.